Greetings and welcome back to room 303 and our continued lectures on the Harvard Classics. We now will turn to the last text in volume 2 of the Harvard Classics, the texts we've already covered, Plato and of course Epictetus as authors. We looked at Plato, we talked about Euthyphro, we looked actually at the Apology, we then looked at his Crito, and of course finally the magnificent Phaedo. Then we turned to the golden sayings of Epictetus. We introduced you to some ideas about Stoic philosophy, and now we will turn to the great spokesman Marcus Aurelius and his Meditations. This in many ways is the last voice of Stoicism. It kind of begins with a guy named Zeno, who's a 4th century Greek philosopher, and kind of culminates in many ways with Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. What's fascinating about that is that by the time Aurelius is writing his Meditations, the Stoic philosophy has kind of fallen out, and it's not spoken of very much. It's certainly not practiced very often. We'll probably find out why as we turn and look at this philosophic view. Obviously, a whole lot we've already said in regards to the Epictetus lecture. If you haven't watched yet my lectures on Plato and the Harvard Classics posted at learnstrong.net down that left-hand side in the link there, I recommend that you do that as you then begin our conversations with Marcus Aurelius and his Meditations. Let's go ahead and ask this question though right away. I mean, anytime that you start hanging out with people that love to talk about philosophy, sooner or later, he or she will get around to a conversation or a comment about Marcus Aurelius. Why is that? And I think there's one powerful answer, and that is, if you love the philosophy of Plato and the way in which Plato will talk about the ideal philosopher king, as we've spoken about it in our lectures earlier on Plato's Republic, you have to be attracted then to Marcus Aurelius for no other reason than he actually tried to live the life of a philosopher king, which is of course fascinating in and of itself. We'll take a look at that in a moment. Let's talk his biography for just a few seconds. You can obviously Google this or whatever to find out more intel if you need it. His dates 121 to 180. He dies in 180 Common Era. He is a Roman emperor from 161 to 180. He's often referred to as one of the last of the great emperors, the good emperors. Lots and lots of wars, and there's very little peace during his reign. Lots of fighting going on. We're already starting to see the fragmentation that's going to probably be a huge part of bringing to the end the Roman Empire here in a couple of hundred more years. But one of the things we want to write down, and let's put this in our notes right away, because he lived such a martial life, that is to say always fighting is going on, it's only natural then that when he would come to look at life, he would look at it as a battlefield, okay? And we'll obviously see some of that when we pick up the text. We should point out as well, though, that the Meditations is not a book that we believe Marcus Aurelius wrote for other people to read. It seems to be a book written to himself. And the great lecturer of Plato and Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism, Mike Segru, has pointed out what I think is absolutely right. What kind of person writes a book to himself? Answer, a lonely person. A person who has no real peers. You know what I mean? Somebody who can't talk to other people. I mean, think about this. He's the most powerful man in the entire world. He can have anything he wants, anytime he wants it. And the challenge for him is to live the Stoic life. Remarkable. Many have argued, well, yeah, Epictetus says, you know, life is what it is, get right with it, because he was for much of his life a slave. I mean, it's not like he had much of a choice, you know what I mean? It's kind of like a position that might make sense if you can't change the way things are. But Marcus Aurelius? Dude, this is a guy that can live his whole life doing anything he wants all the time. He has all power, he has all money, he has everything. He can have sex as much as he wants. He can drink and party as much as he wants. And it's that guy who will say, even in a palace, you can be a good person. Oh, it's going to be interesting for us to study. we should point out, by the way, that there is some people who think that maybe he was writing this for his son Commodus, who's not such a great guy. For those of you, by the way, who know anything about that film Gladiator, and that old man that's played at the beginning by the great actor Richard Harris, he plays the role of Marcus Aurelius, and of course in the film he's killed by his son Commodus. This is not historically accurate, but that maybe gives you some sense at 3a, relationship to other texts. That movie, maybe you know a little about that. There is a blemish in the life of Marcus Aurelius by many historians when in Rome, in the empire, we have plague. And the reason that many say that the plague exists is because of the Christians who are living there. Marcus Aurelius, there's a lot of debate about how involved he was in the actual tormenting and executing of Christians. It's pretty clear Marcus Aurelius had some serious problems with Christians. Sometimes we're stunned when we realize that the early Christian martyrs were killed by Romans because the Christians were perceived as atheists. No kidding. It makes sense once you hear why. In other words, they didn't believe in the gods of the state. They only believed, of course, in the God of the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament Bible, and later, of course, the New Testament. Many debates about to what degree Marcus Aurelius knew about Christianity, because some of his ideas are going to meld very nicely into Christian teaching. Most historians seem to think that Marcus Aurelius didn't have much attention paid to Christians and to Christian theology. I'll let you do your own research on that one. As for the history of the Meditations itself, it's a fascinating history. He writes it, he dies in 180, and it sits silent for 1,000 years. Amazing. It's an amazing thing, in other words, that we even have these words at all. There's really few mentions of the text itself. And then about 1558, it's published in Zurich by a guy named Xylander, and published in Latin. And then we start to hear more and more about it. It's divided into 12 books. Big debate about whether Aurelius himself did all of the divisions or somebody else afterwards. And it's kind of randomly divided. I mean, there's really not a lot of continuity. Many people have said if you read one book of Meditations, you've read all the books of Meditations. I think that's an overstatement, but it is true that the ideas that Marcus Aurelius is going to say to himself, and we'll look at a number of them here in a moment, he says it again and again. I think one of the reasons is because we as humans have an innate tendency to forget the things that matter the most to us. Marcus Aurelius will say this to himself over and over again. Don't forget, don't forget. You got to remember, you got to remember. Let's go to work now with the text itself, and I'm just going to open the volume and begin to tell you and share with you some of my favorite lines. And as I've done in the past, I'll just kind of enjoy sharing some of this stuff with you. If you pick up a copy of Meditations, and again, that's the whole point of all these lectures, I hope that you find some interest in what I'm saying, and then you go and find the text yourself and read it for yourself. Wrestle with the ideas. I said the same thing with Plato and with Epictetus. Obviously, I'll say it with Marcus Aurelius. When you pick it up and you open it, one of the first things that you'll see is he begins right away by saying thank you to the people who raised him. I love this idea. Because I think too often, as especially young people, we don't appreciate that we are a part, as Tennyson says in Ulysses, I'm a part of all that I have met. We're a part of all those people who had such a tremendous influence in our life. And for Aurelius, he wants to say thank you for all those different people. And so right away, he'll begin to say thank you to this person, thank you to that person. For example, he will say to Rustus, he says, I want to say thank you. I'm indebted to him for being acquainted with the discourses of Epictetus. He taught me how to read carefully. Whoa, there's a good suggestion for us right away. Learning how to read with deliberateness. What Francis Bacon, we'll talk about him in another lecture. We'll talk about enough studies. Learning how to digest a book. You are, in many ways, of course, as we said in our Republic lectures, Plato's Republic, you are your education, and your education is far more than your schooling. I mean, think about that. If you, for example, are paying attention at all to the way that you are evolving and living your life, there's a whole lot of stuff that happens outside of school that's a huge part of your education. We'll continue, and now I'll just start sharing ideas. He says that, for example, from a person named Sextus, he learned to never show anger, especially when you're trying to get along with people and never display too much ostentation, as he says. He continues by pointing this out. He says that it is possible for a man to live in a palace without wanting lots and lots of things, to somehow be able to control desires. That will sound very much like Epictetus. He will continue by saying this. I love these opening lines of Book 2, so let's read them together. I'll just share them with you. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All of these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. But I, who have seen the nature of the good, that it is beautiful, and of the bad, that it is ugly, and the nature of him who does wrong, that it is akin to me, not only of the same blood or seed, but that it participates in the same intelligence and the same portion of the divinity, I can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him. For we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another then is contrary to nature, and it is acting against one another to be vexed and to turn away. Two quick observations. Note the brilliance of this idea. And by the way, this is one of those reasons why readers of, for example, Paul's comments, St. Paul's comments in the New Testament, in the book of 1 Corinthians about how the church, the body of Christ, is like a body physically, sounding very similar to lines like this. But it makes total sense to hear what Aurelius is saying. He's saying this: when you get up in the morning, you know that you are going to meet with people who are going to agitate you, who are, back to an earlier word picture about energy conservation, going to start popping holes with that ice pick in the side of your milk carton. The milk reminding you, representing or symbolizing energy, right? So it's like, hey, you know this is going to happen, so don't be shocked when it happens. This is pure Marcus Aurelius Stoicism. You know that you are going to meet people who are challenged. You'll maybe remember a line, however, from Plato. He said, be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting his or her own battle. Whoa. How would that change our lives if we could just kind of capture that idea and live with that idea, not just think it? Let's keep going, shall we? I'm going to turn now to another line. He says, and you, if you will give yourself relief, you have to do every act of your life as if it were the last, laying aside all carelessness and passionate aversions from the commands of reason and all hypocrisy and self-love. Oh, there's a challenge. Now, hey, as you're writing these down, I just recommend that you just write them down and then take a walk or take a long drive and just think about one or two of them. I'm going to challenge you at the end of our time together to say, hey, pick one or two of these ideas and try and live it for just a few minutes. One of these suggestions here is, every act for the rest of your life, try and commit it as if it's the last one. Many years ago, I was a ball coach, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it now. I had a ball player who played very well, very hard, but after a game, a coach, the opponent coach, came up to me and said, you didn't just win this game, but that young man who you coach, and I've been watching you coach him for a while, he ran harder than any kid I've ever seen run before. What'd you say to him before the game? Because I noticed you were talking to him before the game, and I said to him, to the coach, I said, this is what I said to him. I said, hey, you're going to play the best game of your life today because it's an important game. But after the game, on your way home, driving in your car, you're going to be rear-ended. And you'll never walk again. And the kid kind of gave me a look like, whoa, how do you know that? He said, how do you know that? And I said, I don't. But neither do you. Play hard. What would it be like as an athlete to play, run with joy? Because you maybe never get to run again. Talk to old ball players and they would give any amount of money to go back and just run again the way they did when they were young. If that's true, then if you're a ball player, run with joy, knowing that it could be the last time you ever do it, hoping, of course, that it's not. What a compelling idea. I like to share it with you, and then you can kind of think through it. How about this one? Do the things external which fall upon thee distract thee? Give thyself time to learn something new and good, and cease to be whirled around. Wow, what a great idea. We so regularly look at school as the place where they do things to us. How about changing the perspective? School is the place where I get to do things for myself and maybe learn something. What an idea. Let's keep going. Since it is possible that thou mayest depart from life this very moment, regulate every act and thought accordingly. But to go away from among men, if there are gods, is not a thing to be afraid of, for the gods will not involve thee in evil. But if indeed they do not exist, the gods, or if they have no concern about human affairs, what is it to me to live in a universe devoid of gods or devoid of providence? But in truth, he says, the gods do exist, and they do care for human things, and they have put all the means in man's power to enable him not to fall into real evils. It's an interesting question to what degree Marcus Aurelius believed in the gods. He seems to suggest that in the end, it does not matter for him one way or the other. He is going to live the best life that he can. And if there are gods at the end of the life, they will be pleased. And if there are not gods, it won't matter to him, because he says, what difference does it make? I'm going to live the best life I can. It's an interesting argument. I'll let you wrestle with it as you think about it. Let's play this game. How about this one? For a man, he says, cannot lose either the past or the future. For what a man has not, how can anyone take this from him? This is a compelling idea. Let's put this one in our notes. There is no really past. You can't reach out and touch it. It's gone. It's only a memory. There is no such thing as the future, because it never arrives. No matter what future you posit, when you finally get there, you will only be there in the now, in the present, in the moment. Why do we live so much of our life worrying about the past, which we can't even change, which technically doesn't even exist anymore, and the future, which we never actually get to? It's a very interesting idea. Often when I work with ball players, I will point this out to them. They are so fixated on a mistake that they made, and I will say, go back, touch it. I'm sorry, what? Touch it. Yeah, go back. Find it for me. Even if it's on video, it doesn't matter. It's no longer there. It's gone. It's over. Let it go. Apprehensions about the future keep many, many people from ever actually doing anything. Of course, the point is there is no such thing as the future. You never actually get there. When my children were young and we were driving, they would ask me, are we there yet? And I would always respond, yep, we're there. Oh, we passed it. Yep, we're there. Oh, we passed it. What would it mean to live right now in the present moment? Of course, if we could do that, we might be far more focused and intentional on being successful. Let's keep going. I'll turn now to some other lines that I enjoy sharing. The hard part, of course, of talking for me and others about Marcus Aurelius is every third line I want to read out loud for you, but I'll share this one with you. How about this one? If thou, of course, our translator, thou meaning you, if thou workest at that which is before thee, following right reason seriously, vigorously, calmly, without allowing anything else to distract thee, but keeping thy divine part pure, as if thou shouldst be bound to give it back immediately, if thou holdest to this, expecting nothing, fearing nothing, but satisfied with thy present activity according to nature, and with heroic truth in every word and sound which thou utterest, thou wilt live happy. And there is no man who is able to prevent this. I love that Marcus Aurelius uses the word happy so often and regularly in his text. It is a misreading, I believe, of Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius to say Stoic philosophy is such a downer kind of... No, not at all. But notice what he says here. He says it. You have to work without expecting the reward. We commented on this in regards to our Epictetus, and now again we're back to it. If for you, school is about getting the grade, Marcus Aurelius will say, well, what a mistake that is. What if, for example, you get in a class where you don't get the grade? The whole thing was a waste? You're a ball player. we have to win the championship or the entire season's a waste. What a foolish way to look at ball clubs and ball teams and ball seasons. That means there's only one team at the end of the season that can say that it learned anything, that it was a success. This is silliness. Marcus Aurelius says, you should aspire for the championship. But if you don't get the championship, don't consider that season a waste. It wasn't a waste. Your life is built on moments in the present, in the now. And you can be happy now, in this present moment, if you can work without distractions and stay focused. Of course, our chief problem, obviously, is we often give way to laziness, don't we? Students have to admit that if they could be more focused, if they could be more driven to be focused and intentional, they could be more happy in their studies. It's an interesting idea. How about this one? He will make this observation. Man, or men, seek retreats for themselves, houses in the country, seashores and mountains. And thou, too, art wont to desire such things very much. Of course, as an emperor, Marcus Aurelius had any number of places that he could go and go on vacation and hang out. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men. For it is in thy power, whenever thou shalt choose, to retire into thyself. For nowhere, either with more quiet or more freedom from trouble, does a man retire than into his own soul, particularly when he has within him such thoughts that by looking into them, he's immediately in perfect tranquility. And I affirm that tranquility is nothing else than the good ordering of the mind. Constantly then give to thyself this retreat and renew thyself. Wow, what a compelling idea to be able to retreat into yourself. How about this one? Take away thy opinion, and then there is taken away the complaint, I have been harmed. Take away the complaint, I have been harmed, and the harm is taken away. Have you noticed how it's so regularly the case that we want to always share our opinion? Now follow what Aurelius says. He says, it is great for you to have opinions. You